In May, Vladimir Putin probably told himself that things couldn't get any worse. They were losing territory to the Ukrainians, and Ukrainian strikes were hitting all across Russia. Well, someone should have had him talk to any U.S. Army soldier, because they could have told you, buddy, there's always room for things to get worse. And they have, because Russian territorial losses appear to be accelerating. Yikes. Let's talk about it. Plus, of course, Vladimir Putin's cope. So, this is analysis from actually a man within a company called Roshan Consulting, who offers a frontline summary for June, where they find that Russian forces gained about 25 square kilometers, remember, in May, but that due to some unconfirmed Ukrainian advances, they likely had a net loss, i.e. Russian forces took 25 square new kilometers, but probably lost more than that. Not a ton more, as we talked about. Institute for the Study of War assessed that net Ukrainian gains were like 10 to 20 square kilometers, right? Really tiny stuff. But most notably, it combines a slowing Russian advance with a growing Ukrainian advance. In June, it looks much clearer, with Russia's net territorial balance falling decisively by approximately 40 square kilometers, meaning that Russia now controls less of Ukraine than it did 30 days ago. This is a huge metric, but not even as huge as the even more important metric as what it cost Russia. Now, the report is, he claims that Ukrainian forces are conducting counterattacks in the Velko-Novosilka area, as well as north of Lyman, Sloviansk, right? And we're going to talk about all that. But what I want to point out, in a war of attrition, the actual territory is less important, right? I want you to show you this chart. This is going back to January of 2024. This is net territorial gains. You can see March 26, you see the confirmation of Ukrainian liberation of Kupiansk. This actually happened much earlier. But then you also have a kind of Russian resurgent effort, I think, in near Konstantinivka and Toretsk. But then you see May, right? Assess the unconfirmed Ukrainian advances. And now you have a loss in June of 40 square kilometers. But look at this blue chart here. This blue chart represents Russian losses. This represents total ground assault activity. Right? You can see that the average Russian assault, Russia has never conducted more assaults and gotten less for their efforts. And that is really telling, right? And the Center for International Security Studies, CSIS, says that actually they assess Russia has actually lost the initiative. And yes, I want to be clear that along some axes where Russia wants to, it is able to make gains. But making gains in one place costs them more territory in other places. And as we have talked about, cities, urban areas like Konstantinivka are most amenable to Russia's tactics, because instead of having to assault across large distances, the average Russian infantryman simply needs to scamper from house to house. Again, like a cold moving through an area, right? If I have a cold, my nearest neighbor is in a farmhouse 100 meters away, 200 meters away, they're probably not going to catch my cold. But if it's packed and the distance each bacteria has to jump is small, say at a Taylor Swift wedding, well, then you're going to see that cold pass from person to person very quickly, right? That's sort of the dense urban areas allow Russian infantry to jump from building to building quickly and easily. Easily being a, subjective word here. Now, in other sectors south and north of Konstantinivka, Russians actually had net losses. And that it says Russia advanced 30 kilometers across the front line in June, but the Ukrainians actually advanced 70 square kilometers. And the balance, again, the fact is that I think there's a deeper story here, right? And I want to take a look at where this is happening, okay? Because one, we need to acknowledge that decisive control is itself kind of squishy right now. And it has been for a while, because just like in World War II, right? You had Allied lines and Axis lines, right? And in between, there was a no man's land, about 500 meters, where nobody controlled, nobody could. Well, in this war, the no man's land is 15 kilometers deep. So we, and a lot of these mappers, do their best to say, okay, statistically, who do we think is in control of this chunk of turf, right? But the reality is that what you're looking at is probably close to something like this. This is probably a representation of approximately the swath of where decisive control is lacking. Now, obviously, when Russia advances, the areas where they can comfortably control creep forward, and the areas of the gray zone creep backwards, just like World War I. But some of these tiny assessments, like, who controls which building in Rodyanska, well, it's not really that useful a conversation. However, there are some places, right, where you look and you see that where the Ukrainian forces are confirming where they're doing significant work, notably in Zaporizhzhia, right, in this region here, where you can see that we're moving backwards through time right now, guys, by the way, right? So you can see that the Ukrainians, again, these are small, localized counterattacks. I want to make that clear. But what they indicate is not a large scale operation, but what they show is that in local places, one, Ukrainians have a method to take back territory that can be reliably repeated. Two, that Russians lose territory and lack the reinforcements to do anything about it. Normally, right, in 2024 and the first half of 2025, when Ukrainian forces would push into an area, the Russians would deploy their reserves and push the Ukrainians back out. That was a core part of the strategy. Now it is considerably different from that, right? You're seeing a lot of Russian activity in a number of regions, but you're seeing Ukrainian counterattacks move sort of control forward and keep it there. Again, I think it's especially pronounced in the south, but there is reportedly a non-trivial amount of Ukrainian retaking and counterattacking happening here in kind of the northern pocket, that actually these Russians trying to form the top pincer in Konstantinivka just cannot do it and are reportedly getting rolled back pretty routinely. So again, this isn't to say, I'm even reluctant to say the Ukrainians are seizing the ground initiative in the way that we're talking about. But what I do think you have is that the casualties, and this is the biggest takeaway, the rate of casualty is skewing badly against Russia. That is the most important story here, right? Here is a map depicting essentially daily casualty averages since the start of the war, right? You can see at the initial invasion, right, through 2022, casualties are actually pretty low. And you can see that there has been a steady increase right through 2023. You can see the casualties rise, but then, right, look at the scale of these casualties. You can see this is the big Russian push into Avdiivka and to a lesser extent Bakhmut. But now you can see that basically, other than 2024, early 2025, Battle of Avdiivka, when Russia really pushed hard, the Russian casualties have actually experienced a really localized surge, particularly since about May, where, again, the key difference here, when Russia burned all of these troops in 2024, early 2025, Russia was taking territory. The troops the territory per casualty was actually like, I mean, none of these are good by any modern war standards, but they were measurable. Here, again, they've lost, 35, almost 40,000 troops in a given month. And to show for it, they have almost nothing. Right? I mean, you can see it looks like the average here, probably I'd say about 1,400 losses a month. I mean, absolutely insane numbers, right? Let's see if we can do it by months. So when we look at it again by month, I mean, you can see pretty clearly, going back to the start of the war, that this is a spike in losses without achieving anything on the battlefield. This is what Russia has to lose, again, to keep territorial losses limited to just a net loss of 40 square kilometers. Think about that. This is what they have to burn to stop from losing. And when you combine that with the fact that numerous reports, not just Marco Rubio, but other independent analysts have found that, yeah, the Ukrainian losses are between 1/5 and 1/8 of what Russia's losing, you start to see that the battlefield is actually turning against Putin. But notice that he's starting to roll out the cope. He's starting to look, right? Again, you notice he's wearing the military uniform. That usually comes out when he's going to make some kind of, I'm going to say, decision that is not great for the Russian people, but a decision that reflects a militarized state, when he's moving towards making the country more militarized. And that seems to be what he's doing, right? And he, again, projects this reassurance. This is a very pro-Putinist outlet, so they use the Russian propaganda terms for some of these areas, describing, for example, occupied Luhansk Oblast as the Luhansk People's Republic. This is an unrecognized term for, well, it's very confusing. It's not, even Russia can't decide if it's part of Russia or if it's actually an independent republic. But they, he calls it the liberation of the Luhansk People's Republic has been recently completed, claiming that they control all of Luhansk Oblast. And he also argues that Russian forces have taken full control of Konstantinivka, a city he describes as having great strategic significance. I've been to Konstantinivka. It's a lot of things. It does not have great strategic significance. It is the next thing after Toretsk. That's about all it is. But this, again, they do not have control over it. He's likely using a Russian term called fire control, which means that you can basically put fires onto the area. But it is not decisive control, obviously. If you had control, the Ukrainians wouldn't be able to put people into it. And again, comically, he calls it a key transportation hub and major industrial center of Donbas. This is just not correct. I don't know what else to tell you. It's not those things. It's not insignificant, right? But right now, it's a war zone. Again, I was there in 2024. It's just a war zone. It was evacuated in 2024. No one lives there. And interestingly enough, and this is the most interesting part, actually, Putin said the Russian forces have taken control of 133 settlements and more than 3,000 square kilometers since 2026. And I mean, that's probably a little bit fantastical, but it might be grounded in something vaguely resembling truth, because, as we talked about, the Russians do make gains. Like, they do make gains. But what they do not do is offset, but those gains are offset by losses elsewhere. And again, these deep state mappers generally will not publish Ukrainian gains until the Ukrainian armed forces confirm them. And the Ukrainian armed forces generally aren't confirming ongoing operations. So I think it's really interesting to see him roll out what's obviously cope, right? What's obviously an untrue lie about the state of the Russian military. Now, guys, it's July 4th weekend, which means that if you want your energy, right, we've got you covered. If you're tired of chugging energy drinks, right, Strike Gum is the energy drink alternative, right? 0 sugar, 100 milligrams caffeine, 90 milligrams caffeine, 100 milligrams alpha GPC, made in the USA. It's a no-brainer. Why are you spending $5 on an energy drink at a gas station? I know what these things cost. It's way too much. So that's why we're made in the USA. We're not trapped in a ship in Hormuz. Okay. We haven't raised our prices since 2023. And, oh yeah, because it's July 4th weekend, giving you 15% off. Snap sale for July. The promo code is 4JULE26, the military way of writing the date and time group. And you'll get 15% off your order. That easy. Go to strikegum.com. Do it. Thanks to our Colonel tier members, Charles, Shield, Brent, Andreas, Jim, John, CPC, Leonis, Gabriel, and all the Lieutenant tier folks. Couldn't do it without you guys. Also hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.